Welcome back to a Fifth of Jack Gaming, where today we're going to have a little fun with a deck tech. But before we do that, a little bit of channel business. We end up covering Magic the Gathering. We do deck techs, pack openings, stuff like that. Then we also end up doing gaming with online online through our Twitch, which is the Fifth of Jack all spelled out. And then we also open up or do comic books. We do Amis, hauls, and then I'll let you know what will be coming up next week. If that's something you're interested into, hit that little subscribe button, and while you're down there, hit that little bell to be notified whenever we come out with new content. Alright, with that said, let's jump over to moxfield.com and show you the deck tech of today's deck. Alright, so we're over at moxfield.com. And today's deck tech is You Want More? ? Exclamation point. Main reason is that we want more because you always hear that we want more mana or something like that. So we took that and brought back a thing that you haven't seen for a while called Mana Burn. So who's the commander of this? Yurlok, the Scorched Thrash. So it's one black, a red, and a green with a legendary creature. It has to be a legendary creature to be our commander, so that makes it. Versatile Shaman has Vigilance, and then a player losing unspent mana causes that person to lose that much life, aka Mana Burn to our experienced players out there. You can pay one, tap it, each player adds a black, red, and a green. It's a 4/4 body. So the big thing about this is that we want to be giving out mana to everyone, because once we end up paying the one and tapping it, each player will end up getting that, and they'll end up getting the mana to be able to do what they want to do with it, and if they don't, they get burned. So we play heavily into that role. Obviously, you can see what we end up having. This deck has 22 creatures, 5 sorceries, 6 instants, 10 artifacts, 20 enchantments, and 36 lands altogether. So I kind of wanted to go with an enchantment build that went with this. So our enchantments and the creatures is all pretty much 1-for-1. Which I lied, we have 23 enchantments. Because 3 of our creatures count as enchantments as well. So we'll get through the boring part real quick, which would be the lands. This is going to be more of a budget setup for the lands itself. If you were actually going to play this as a higher tier or anything like that, you would want to replace these with some, or replace some of these for like fetch lands, shock lands, or if you have them, dualies. So we got a Kernel Refuge that comes in the battlefield tap, and then we gain 1 life. It taps for a black or a red. Bloodfell Coals does the exact same thing. Command Tower taps for any color of our mana. We have 8 Forest, 1 Gagari Rock Farm. There's a battlefield tapped, and then it's kind of like those bounce lands is what this is when it enters the battlefield, you have to return a land to its owner's hand. But the next turn we'll be able to untap it and produce a black and a green. Jungle Hollow enters the battlefield tapped, you gain 1 life. It also taps for a black or a green. 9 Mountains. Racer's Ring enters the battlefield tapped, taps for a green or a red, or we could pay 2 a red and a green and sacrifice it to draw a card. Ractus Canarium's another bounce land, except for it gives us a black and a red. Riveteers Overlook, when it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. When you do, search your library for a basic swamp, mountain, or forest. Put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle, and you gain 1 life. So that kind of works out nicely because that's all of our colors right there. A swamp, a thriving bluff. So we have the thriving ones that comes in there. They enter the battlefield tapped, and then we get to choose a different color than what that land ended up producing. So like this thriving bluff, for instance, it taps and adds a red. We can end up saying black or green, and it also tap for that color. And then we have Tram, Station, enters the battlefield tapped, and then we could tap it for a black or a red. Or we could pay 2, a black and a red, tap it, sacrifice it to draw a card. And then we have a Woodland Chasm. It enters the battlefield tap, and it taps for a green and a black. It's a snowland. It's a swamp/forest. AKA another dually. Seems like a little bit bugged. Alright, with that, we're going to jump on over to the sorceries. We have a decent sweep with it. I like to go with X Tribal because we can end up jumping whatever we end up having mana-wise into it. So we got the good old classic Fireball. Costs X and a red. It's a sorcery, as we know. So Fireball deals X amount of damage divided evenly. Round down among any number of target creatures or players. Fireball costs 1 colorless more to cast for each target beyond the first. So it's a nice little cheap multi-be able to burn something out or burn someone out. Wireless Dreams costs XX and a green. And then we get to return X amount of cards from your graveyard to your hand. And then we exile it. Lava Avalanche costs a black, a red, and a green, aka Jundum. So we're Junding them. And X. So it deals X amount of damage to a target player or planeswalker, and each creature that player controls, or planeswalkers they control. So I kind of liked it because it goes either more creature removal, or it's planeswalker removal, so it has a nice universal stick to it. Talking about being universal, we have Maelstrom Pulse that costs a black, a green, and 1. Destroy a target non-land permanent and other permanents with the same name type of that permanent. So this works really good with like stuff like tokens or anything like that, because you could target one of the tokens and then end up destroying all the tokens. Or it's like a permanent. You can hit planeswalkers, you can hit anything that's on the board. It just has to make sure it's not a land. And then in Garrick's Wake, costs 7 and 2 black. Destroy all creatures you don't control and all planeswalkers you don't control. More board wipe to be able to protect it. There's another one that would be really good, called Blasphemous Act. It costs 8 and a red. This costs 1 less for each creature that's on the battlefield. Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. So it's kind of a nice little board wipe that gets cheaper as you see more stuff. Like if you have tokens that make a whole bunch of them, or if you just have a person that just had played a bunch of elves or something like that, that'll be a nice little wipe for it. The big thing is it also hits us too, and then we have some instants that comes over to play. We have Comet Storm, costs X and 2 red, as multi-kicker. So that means you could pay that as an additional to its spell cost. So it's multi-kicker 1, so we pay 1 extra and everything. Choose a target creature or player. Then choose another target creature or player for each time Comet Storm was kicked. Comet Storm deals X amount of damage to them. So it's a kind of like a fixed Fireball version, because it's instant speed. It costs 1 red or 1 red extra to be able to do that at instant speed though, which I think is completely worth it. And especially we're going to be able to give mana and do stuff on other people's turns. That's where that's going to be playing a role into it. Then we have Electro Dominance that costs X and 2 red for an instant, and then it deals X amount of damage to any target. You may cast a card with a converted mana cost of X or less from your hand without paying this mana cost. Sounds legitly solid and everything that comes along with it. Tobolt's Trickery is kind of like our little counter spell that comes with it. Beast Within gets to destroy a target permanent. Kind of decided to go with the removal of permanents. That way it ends up trying to help out any kind of a problem that we end up having. They end up getting a 3/3 beast out of it. Chaos Warp possibly gets rid of that permanent as well, because they end up shuffling it into the library. and fling the top card on there. And if it's a permanent, it stays right in the battlefield. New card I want to be trying out is this Riveteers Charm. It's a black, red, and green. And then we have multiple different modes that we can end up choosing. Because it says choose one. Target opponent sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker they control with the highest mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Exile the top cards of your library, or the top 3 cards of your library until end of turn, or until the end of the next end step. You may play those cards, or you can exile a target player's graveyard. In EDH, you kind of want to have a little bit more flexibility cards, and that's why I kind of ended up wanting to try this out. Another one I would be thinking about to play in here would be Riveteers Charm. And then we're going to keep on going down this little aisle right here. It's artifacts. We have Soul Ring, obviously, Arcane Signet, Higari Signet, Gruul Signet, Rakdos Signet. So with these signets and everything, it's also helping us mana fix, but it also makes it so we don't end up having to play with or worry about tapping our land so much. You're going to find that out, especially with our enchantments, that can be a little bit devastating. So we have Swiftfoot Boots, and then we have these untapping effects with Staff of Domination, Umbra Mantle, and the Sword of the Perunes. All being untapped and everything, and it can end up going infinite with our commander if we end up having 3 or more or 4 or more mana. So right now it taps for 3, but when we go over to the enchantments, I'll be able to show you. Well, while we're right here, most will jump on over there real quick. When we play Leyline of Abundance, it lets us tap for additional green, so that will let our commander tap for 4, and we can keep on untapping it and keep on going, and eventually burn everyone out, because we'll be doing it during our turns unless they have an instant they'll be able to use all that mana. But if they don't, obviously mana burn's going to be playing a big role into it. And the final but not least is Horizon Stone. Costs us 5, but if you lose unspent mana, that mana becomes cardless instead. So we don't end up losing it, we just end up banking it. And which way should we go? Creatures, enchantments. Creatures, and enchantments. Let's jump on over to enchantments. We'll see what we end up funneling over to it and what kind of coolness that we have in here. So we have Helix Pinnacle. This is the win con for this deck. With how much mana we end up going over with it, this is what we can end up winning out of nowhere. It's an enchantment that costs a green that has Shroud, so that means we can't target it, but they can't target it. And then we pay X, and then we put X amount of tower counters on Helix Pinnacle. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 100 or more tower counters on Helix Pinnacle, you win the game. This is our win card. You win card in this deck. Now we have a little bit of hate that comes with this. Is Cinder Vines. It costs a red and a green. And then whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to that player. So you're going to be casting non-creature spells. Okay, it's going to keep on pinging you and everything about that. So if we end up running into a spell slinger card, it ends up doing it. And you notice it's opponent, so it doesn't target us. Or we could pay 1, sacrifice it, and destroy a target artifact or enchantment, and it deals 2 damage to that permanent's owner. And now here comes some old school shenanigans with Power Surge. Costs us 2 red, and during each player's upkeep, Power Surge deals damage, or deals that player 1 damage for each land he or she controls that was untapped at the beginning of this turn, before the untap phase. So this happens right before the untap phase, and it counts how many lands that they had untapped. Really trying to push that voids of having to tap your lands to be able to play everything out. Quest of Renewal is an enchantment that after it gets 4 or more counters, it will untap everything. Well, everything creature-wise. We have a bunch of mana dorks, and that's just going to end up helping out with it. and it untaps it during each turn. Rolling Vortex is the one that does 1 damage of the upkeep, and whenever a player casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast this spell, Rolling Vortex deals 5 damage to that player. And then we could pay a red, and your opponents can't gain life this turn. We're playing a burn deck, so we don't want them to gain life. So we're going to be stopping that right in its tracks. Citadel of Pain is another one that deals damage for untapped lands. Heartbeat of Springs is whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land can produce, so doubling their mana. Rocking it over to Mana Flare, that costs 1 red and 2, and then whenever a player taps a land for mana, it produces an additional of the same type. It produces a mana of the same type. So we got mana doublers that comes into the play with it. And then Overburdens costs 1, a red, and a green. And then also when they tap a land, that player adds 1 mana of additional types to their of the same pool. So the same type of mana that they end up having, and then it deals 1 damage to him or her. As you're seeing, we're letting them produce a lot more mana, and that's where this is coming like a group hug aspect, is that we're helping out everyone, but we're also doing damage, and I like to call it a pointy hug, because yeah, we're help you, and then boop boop. Phyrexian Arena is another draw cards. Sulfur Vortex deals 2 damage to a player at their upkeep, and if they would gain life, they would not gain life this turn, so this stops life gain as well. Titanic Instability costs 2 and a red, and it's an enchantment. It's whenever a land comes into play, tap all lands its controller controls. So we're either going to have them take damage for having the lands that's untapped, or we're going to make them have to use all their mana at the time. And if they can't use all that mana, it's going to be mana burn. Burning Earth does 1 damage to that player for each non-basic that they tap. And this is something that's fun, and, well, not so fun, is Spurners of Wrath. Whenever a source will deal damage to a creature or player, it deals double that damage to that creature or player instead. So, like when everything's taken 1, like from the Cinder Vines, for instance, they're actually taking 2. And it keeps on going over with it and doubling the damage that ends up coming out of it. And then we have Mana Barbs, which ends up doing more shenanigans, is whenever a player taps a land, it deals 1 damage to that player. War's Toll ends up whenever an opponent taps a land for taps a mana, or taps lands for mana, tap all the lands. If a creature or if an opponent would attack, all creatures that they control attack. So it's kind of like a little force thing, trying to get one way, one spectrum. We don't mainly have it in there for the creatures aspect, but we have it in there for the lands aspect. We have a little bit of protection with asceticism. Also, it's another little mana dump that we can end up doing to regenerate everything. Dictate of Chemmetra has flash, and it also does more mana doubling. Wound Reflection. So what's really nice is at the end of each person's turn, however much damage that they end up taking, they take that again. So that's amazing. That's going to be coming over here. You kind of made this kind of like a burn deck that come out of with it. And now, finally, but not least, it's going to be the creatures. So at the 1-drop slot, we have Birds of Paradise that taps for any mana. Elves of Deep Shadow pings us for 1. Elves of Deep Shadow pings us for 1 to produce a black. Elvis Mystic taps for a green. Ford Hornrose taps for a green. Igabor Hierarch, it has Exalted, taps for green, red, or a black. Land of War Elves, good old classic, taps for a green. And then we're also having back into some more mana that's going to be coming over with it. Magus of the Vineyard costs us 1 for 1/1. But at the beginning of each player's pre-combat main phase, add 2 green mana to that player's mana pool. BB, the Corrupted Absorber, costs us a green and a forest. Wait, that's the same thing. Taps for either a forest or a swamp. Wait, that's not true. Taps for a forest and a swamp. There, we got there. Woohoo! It's a 2/2. And then at the beginning of each player's post-combat main phase, that player adds 2 colorless for each of your opponents who lost life this turn. Damage cost is loss of life. And then we have our first enchantment creature with Destiny Spinner, costs us 1 and a green for a 2/3. Creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. That's amazing. And then we also have a little active ability of pay 3 and a green. Target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's still a land. We got a Harsh Mentor that ends up pinging them for whenever they do any kind of activated ability of an artifact, creature, or a land. And if it isn't a mana ability, they take 2 damage. Or if we have Spurners of Wrath, they'll take 4 damage. Suta Druid adds 1 green mana, and then whenever we tap it, Suta Druid deals 1 damage to each opponent. Another possible way to burn them out. Colothus God of Destiny. So this is kind of like an interesting one. It's indestructible, and as long as your devotion to red and green it is less than 7, it isn't a creature. We don't really care if it's a creature or not. The big thing is at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, exile a target card from a graveyard. So we're removing a card from the graveyard, and that's what this is going to end up being. It's kind of a graveyard hate. If it was a land, add a green or a red. Otherwise, you gain 2 life, and Colothus deals 2 damage to each opponent. So doubling the damage, it would end up doing 4 damage to each opponent. Omnath is another mana dump that we can end up putting all that unused mana into him. Stoneshaker Shaman. At the end of each player's turn, that player sacrifices an untapped land. It's a 1/1. So this is making them have to end up using all their mana. If not, they have to sacrifice it. Surveil is another mana dump that we can end up doing it, making icy mana lifts, and then eventually we'll be able to use the game plan of paying 6, a red and a green, and we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library. You may cast a spell from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest at the bottom of the library in a random order. So eventually they're going to end up having it. So another one I really wanted to put in here, and we've been seeing a lot of these kind of things, especially with the new Dominaria set, is a sleeper agent. Zancha Sleeper Agent costs us 1, a black, and a red. Little minion, it's a 5/5, and then as it enters the battlefield, an opponent of your choice gains control of it. So we're giving up control of it, but there's a big reason why. Zancha attacks each combat if able. Can't attack its owner or planeswalkers its owner's controls. So we don't end up keeping control of it, but we're still the owner of it, so it can't end up attacking us or our planeswalkers. But that's not the main reason that we have it in here. We have it where you can pay 3. Zancha's controller loses 2 life, and you draw a card. Any player may activate this ability. So yes, we're end up giving a source where they can end up dropping the mana into it. But we're also given a source where they can end up taking out the opponent and everything. So we have a big threat right there. We can toss this on them and have the entire table burn them out. It's a political card, and it's something that's intriguing that I would like to end up trying to use sometime. Then we have Eidolon of Blossoms, which is our draw field that comes with it. So this is why I kind of went with the enchantment base with it, is whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. So we got 23, 24 different ways that we can end up drawing a card off it. And it kind of seems like it's borderline with it, but it's something I want to end up trying out. Elros, God of the Dead. This stops life gain. Can't say it enough. We need to stop life gain. It's the main reason that we have it, and we have the added ability of paying a black and 1 to pay 2 life to draw a card, so we can end up drawing a card. Becoming a creature, we're not super worried about that. We're wanting to static abilities. Keeper of Progenitus is whenever they tap a mountain, a forest, or a plains, that player adds 1 mana of the thing, of whatever they can end up producing. So it's another mana doubler that we end up having. Another thing that we have that we could pipe everything into is Temur Sabertooth. So obviously it costs us 4 with 2 green and 2 for a 4/3. But we could pay 1 and a green and return another creature card to its owner's hands. If you do, Temur Sabertooth gains indestructibility. So we have a board wipe that we're coming down. We can end up paying, bouncing everything back, and having him be indestructible, most likely keeping him on there, unless it's something that exiles. But we also can end up choosing to pay the 2 and keep on paying the 2, that way we don't end up burning ourselves with the mana and not bounce anything back to our hand. Because it says you may return a creature. You don't have to end up taking back a creature. Seaborn Muse, more untapping shenanigans, where it untaps everything at each upkeep, so we could keep on doing that kind of craziness. And final, but not least, is Zeta Ancient. It's another mana doubler that they end up tapping to add more mana with it. Wanted to go heavily into the mana doubling with it. So, and then what I love about Moxfield is that it shows you other things that you need. So like the tokens that we need a Beast token, and we need Icy Mana Lifts. Okay, easy enough. And then we have cards that I would consider to put in there, change out, and stuff like that. So, with the sorceries, Damnable Pack would be kind of nice because you could draw X amount of cards and have them lose X amount of life. In this Diablo Revelations, it costs 5 and X, and we get to search that many cards from our library, equal to the amount of X. Victory Chimes. I like Victory Chimes because the thing is that it untaps and we get to add 1 colorless mana. It was legitimately the last card I cut out of the deck, but I feel like that should be something that could be said about it. With that said, you also can end up looking at this. Let's see if I can end up finding it real quick. Nope. Okay. There's also a lantern that ends up doing the same thing that you can end up doing that with. That adds 1 colorless, but it doesn't untap during the person's untaps, or like every upkeep. That's kind of why I was in the last cut with the Victory Chimes. And then we're going to do a little reverse order because we'll come back over to enchantments. We'll jump over with the creatures I was thinking about. Vexing Sesher. It can't be countered, and then target spell can't be countered. Seems a little nice. Morgus, God of Slaughter, is that they end up sacrificing a creature. If they don't, they take 2 damage. Cavalier of Flame seems like another legit idea for it, because another mana dump that we can end up dumping it into. We could pay a red and a colorless and make them gain 1 life and gain haste until end of turn. And then there's also a value that could come off there. And this is also the second to last card because I wasn't exactly sure how I felt about this in the deck. It's Ruxar. Ruxar is a big dum-dum, but he's amazing for what he does. Vigilance Reach, okay. Attacks each combat if able. Alright. But the big reason that you would want Ruxar in there is whenever they cast, or whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, Ruxar does 6 damage to that player. So, the main reason I ended up cutting them out of here is obviously we're not a creature deck. We're about half of it being enchantments with artifacts and stuff like that. So we're most likely going to be the ones taking the 6. So I end up taking them out for that reason. And then we're going to jump over to the enchantments. Is the vineyard that the Magus is over into is Emmer's Vineyard. And then at the beginning of each player's main phase, add 2 green to that mana pool. Given more mana, keep on going with it. City of Solitude, each player may play spells and abilities only during their turns. So that's another way to prevent people doing stuff during our turn. Which I thought about that, but then it also prevents us because it says each player, not each opponent. Price of Glory is another thing, is making them have to tap lands. Whenever a player taps a land for mana during another player's turn, destroy that land. So this is whenever you try to do like a counter spell or anything like that, they'll end up sacrificing those lands. Elemental Resistance costs 2 and a green. It's an enchantment permanent. At the beginning of your pre-combat phase, add mana equal to the enchantment permanent's cost. So it's kind of adding more mana, having us mana ramp into it. And talking about mana ramp, finally but not least, is Mana Reflection. It's heavy cost at 4 and 2 green, so 6 altogether. But if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces twice as much. So that ends up being nice because it's more mana doubling and stuff like that, which we're heavy into already. But I had the choice between that or Wound Reflection, and I kind of liked Wound Reflection, especially since we're like more of a pinger style with it. So that's the deck. That's some suggestions that you can end up adding in there. There's also a couple, or there's that creature that ends up giving 3 times. I believe it's Nyx Bloom Ancient. Oops. Let's find the ends. And I should be moving that right over into the thing. That's a suggestion and everything. But it's also a tripler, so it's not a doubler, but we can end up doubling and making it, so we make a whole bunch of mana. But the main reason I didn't end up adding that is also because of the cost right here. And it costs us 7 mana, which we can get up to quite easily. I mean, we're capping out at 5 for our creatures. And we're camping at 6 for enchantments, so we can easily get up there. We have enough ramp, we have artifact ramp, we have everything that goes on with it, so we can still end up doing stuff. And then we have the untapped shenanigans. But it just didn't end up making the cut. So that's the deck. That's some suggestions for you. What do you guys think about it? Let us know down in the comments down below. And if you're liking the content that we're putting out, like, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon to be notified whenever we come out with new content. Thank you to the little people at moxfield.com for allowing us to be able to use their site to be able to show you a deck tech and see what's going on with it. I'm going to try shooting for doing at least one deck tech once a month to at least have something that's going on with it. And if there's any suggestions or anything, also put it down in the comments down below. I love reading the comments that we end up having, and I also like to respond to every comment that we end up having to be able to see what's going on. So with that said, thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.